Obviously, my name's Roddy McNinch or Roderick McNinch. I'm with Taurus Ag Marketing. We specialize in agronomic marketing in Western Canada. Why we've pursued Sulphur Plus, or why we've taken on the Sulphur Plus brand in Canada, is really fitting an agronomic need. If you look at a good chunk of North America is calcium deficient, a good chunk of North America is actually looking for amendments in the soil, calcium related. And we just really struggled finding products that suited our logistics and equipment needs in Canada, particularly. Like we run a lot of fertilizer, we run a lot of amendments through drills or through air seeders or in the seed row, I guess you could say. We don't float on as much product as they do in some other parts in the world. And so to start out with, for that, we need a very good handling product. We've looked at a number of competitors in the mine gypsum space. We've looked at some calcium carbonate products. At the end of the day, none of them fit our needs in the sense that none of them handled the way we needed them to handle in Canada. They just plugged up a lot of equipment, caused all sorts of logistical issues and problems, and maybe even the temperature and conditions played into that in Canada. But at the end of the day, we couldn't make them logistically do what we needed them to do. So we were looking for a good handling product, and the idea of a synthetic gypsum or a synthetic calcium sulfate really appealed to us. A pure synthetic calcium sulfate in the form of Sulphur Plus. There's university research on those release curves. We know in application when that product is going to be available to the crop and when it's going to be available to the plant or amending the soil or whatever we need it to do. So I mean, just the agronomic consistency of that, and then the logistical flexibility of being able to run it through any piece of equipment we want to run it through, really provides no comparison. When I compare the Sulphur Plus to say a calcium carbonate, I mean calcium carbonate can react in the soil. Over time, it can react in the soil and do some very wonderful things. Plant availability is pretty questionable. We're trying, when we go with Sulphur Plus, we're going with a product that is not only plant available, is not only providing the calcium and sulfate to the crop that we're trying to grow, but we're also providing soil amendment properties. So it's kind of a I don't like the term one size fits all, but I mean it's kind of a multi-use product, which is pretty appealing. I mean when you look at how we can use it compared to a calcium carbonate, compared to limestone or any of the liming products. I mean, it's just a much friendlier using version of calcium fertilizer than anything else we've seen in the marketplace so far. Something that always comes up with growers is a price point or cost effectiveness. I think Sulphur Plus has done a very good job of being competitive in the marketplace. So I mean, that's something we appreciate and once again, I mean, I go down the list of things we're looking for a fertilizer that fits our needs, and it kind of checks all the boxes. Well, a good chunk of North America is calcium deficient. You look historically at agriculture in Canada, farmers have been using sulfur for decades. It's a very commonly applied fertilizer, and I always ask the question to growers, what's more important, calcium or sulfur? And it's a trick question because one product isn't more important than another. They're both essential nutrients. They're both macronutrients. They're both secondary macronutrients, but we need an awful lot of the products to grow our crops. So what I find interesting is we grow a lot of canola in Western Canada. You look at the marketplace I'm in Alberta. To grow a 50 bushel canola crop, you need about twice as much calcium as you do sulfur. And what's interesting is we've applied sulfur as a fertilizer for years, and yet very few farmers are applying calcium. When I ask growers why that is, it comes down to a number of reasons, but the biggest being that we haven't had a good handling calcium that's really plant available and can provide our fertilizer needs. And Sulfur Plus, in my mind, the technology of Sulfur Plus is the first product to actually be able to do that. So that's pretty exciting. If you dig into the agronomy, and I'm picking on canola here, but there's 20-some million acres of canola in Western Canada. When applying a gypsum or a calcium product of some sort, they talk about how it mellows the soil. They don't really, most people don't understand how that works, but when you talk about mellowing the soil, really what you're talking about is increasing the porosity of it. So when you look at the cations that compose really a large portion of the soil makeup, I'm going to compare calcium or magnesium or sodium or hydrogen. A lot of those molecules, something like sodium or magnesium, they're very small molecules. So they're very tightly packed with very, very little porosity between those molecules. When you compare that to calcium, it's a much larger molecule. With a larger molecule, obviously you get more porosity within the soil. That's where you get the oxygen flow into the soil. That's where you get the water infiltration into the soil. And really you create an environment that's very beneficial for the microbiology of the soil. In doing that, there's kind of a compounding effect using say Sulfur Plus year after year after year. Year one is going to be very good. You're going to aerate that soil. You're going to mellow that soil, like growers say. Year two is going to be better. Year three is going to be better yet. And kind of like an analogy I always use is if you look at the microbiology in the soil, they're going to help to mellow that soil. They're going to help to aerate the soil, but they need an environment they can survive in. I always compare it to human beings in a gymnasium. If you were a human being in a gymnasium and I filled it full of sand grains, what would happen to that human being? He would suffocate. There wouldn't be enough porosity or enough airflow within those sand grains for that human being to survive. He would suffocate or lack oxygen. That's similar to a soil with say high sodium or high magnesium. Those tightly packed pores, or those tightly packed molecules, lack a lot of porosity. You compare that to a human being standing in a gymnasium and we fill it full of basketballs. That would be the equivalent to the calcium molecule. So, I mean, if I fill that full of basketballs, that human being, they may not be very comfortable, but there's going to be a lot of porosity between those basketballs. There's going to be enough oxygen content for that person to survive. And at the end of the day, that's the analogy that really meets what calcium does to the soil when a grower looks at mellowing their soil. When they talk about that mellowing, they're talking about increasing porosity. You increase porosity, you increase oxygen flow into the soil, you increase water infiltration into the soil, which is a very wonderful thing for the microbiology, the root system. You increase microbiology, you increase CO2 respiration in the soil, which feeds the root system and essentially drives photosynthesis, which is a very wonderful thing when it comes to being a grower in Western Canada. Our equipment, our logistics in Canada, a good handling product is an absolute must. I've heard a number of companies say we are somewhat picky in Canada when it comes to our fertilizer products, and that's fine. Maybe we are, but we also deal with some conditions, some humidity, some temperatures that a lot of the rest of the world doesn't deal with. So it's handling is number one. I don't know of any other calcium or sulfate product that has a controlled release window of 60 to 80 days, similar to Sulfur Plus. I think if you look at a 1-year application or a 1-year use product, like I said, I don't know of any other product that has that. And then those are probably my big two as far as advantages. I'll probably talk about the salt index. I mean, that low salt index, that's a key. Soil health, plant health. I mean, these are major topics of discussion right now. I'm going to say that low salt index is one, but I'd also kind of like to throw in that binder that is unique to Sulfur Plus. We use a binder, or I shouldn't say we. Sulfur Plus uses a binder in their product, and I think it really goes a long way to help with handling as well. But it's ammonium lignosulfonate binder, which is essentially a heavy dose of fulvic and humic acid. If you if you put a value on the fulvic and humic acid in Sulfur Plus compared to some of the other fulvics or humics sold in the marketplace, the calcium sulfate would actually be free. I think a lot of the times we're doing more research on it ourselves. I want to understand this a little better yet, but I think we don't put enough value. Excuse me. I think we don't put enough value on the ALS or ammonium lignosulfonate binder in Sulfur Plus. I think there's a big advantage there that no one else is using or utilizing in a product like that, and I think as we understand that better, it's going to be excuse me, it's going to be more of a topic of conversation in the years to come. Now, I'd kind of like to talk about the fits of Sulfur Plus. So when I look at the advantages are kind of related to where I see the fit of Sulfur Plus. I think the number one fit of Sulfur Plus is flexibility. I mean, it can be used anywhere with that good handling. I'm relating handling to fit, but being able to run it through a drill, being able to run it through a floater, being able to blend it with other fertilizers and run it through an actual fertilizer plant, blending it with urea and storing it for the winter. All of these things are major logistical challenges in Canada that Sulfur Plus can check the box on anything. So as far as a fit, if you can make things easy, people like the products. I mean, Sulfur Plus is a fit. I'm going to say, and I'd almost struggle to find a place in Western Canada where Sulfur Plus isn't a fit. I think I think there's areas, and this kind of leads me into my number two fit, but I think there's areas that would say their soils have higher calcium levels, and maybe they don't need a calcium sulfate versus an ammonium sulfate or an elemental sulfur, whatever that is. And I'm not going to argue that on the agronomy side, but what I will say is I've been in a lot of these areas that so-called higher calcium soils, and I mean, I'm still seeing compaction issues in these soils. I'm seeing some high magnesium soils that needs to be balanced out. I'm seeing some high sodium soils. If you look at the fit of Sulfur Plus just on an amendment spectrum, I don't care if people feel they're in an area of high calcium already. The only way to get rid or lower another cation like sodium or a high mag compacted soil is to add another calcium or add in another cation, calcium being the primary one. I mean, if you've got a sodium issue, which I will challenge every farmer in Canada, whether or not they have a sodium issue, or Western Canada, I should say. I know there's patches out there on every farm. If you have that sodium issue, really the only way to displace that is, or the only efficient way to displace that is a gypsum. And so how that actually works is you look at a calcium sulfate bond, you apply that to a high sodium soil. I mean, if you just went in with a lime, that lime or calcium is going to displace the sodium, but it's going to attach to the next soil particle. So if you look at a calcium or a gypsum or a calcium sulfate, that calcium sulfate bond breaks, calcium knocks the sodium off the soil particle. That sodium then binds to the sulfate that's sitting there plant available. Once you have it bound to that sodium or to that sulfate, you end up with sodium sulfate, which is a very leachable nutrient, and basically we can try to leach that below the rooting zone or out of the rooting zone. So I mean, that's kind of the agronomy or the amendment side of it, and essentially it works the same thing in a real compacted soil. We already talked about the porosity of calcium, but if you have a very high magnesium, a very compacted soil where you have poor infiltration, I mean that magnesium is gonna displace the calcium, but then that sulfate that's part of that calcium is gonna displace the magnesium. But that sulfate in our calcium sulfate is then going to bind to that magnesium, essentially forming a magnesium sulfate or Epsom salts, and that magnesium sulfate is in a very leachable nutrient, so we can get it out of the rooting zone. So as far as an amendment property or amendment product, calcium sulfate or in our case the synthetic gypsum is an excellent way to go. And a third fit, I mean, I get back to it time after time after time, but it's The third fit is plants need calcium. I mean, this is a macronutrient. It's as amazing as it seems. We need macronutrients. We need micronutrients. There are way more growers using micronutrients in Western Canada than there are macronutrients. And you think about that, yes, NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Those are your primary primary macronutrients. Your secondary macronutrients of calcium, magnesium, sulfur. I mean, those are all just as important. And though we have a lot of people using sulfur, calcium is quite often ignored, and that just relates to what we've had historically for products and how poor of handling products they've been. But I think Sulfur Plus has raised the bar with that and really fixed that problem. So. Obviously, I'm with Taurus Ag Marketing, but I worked some years in ag retail as well. The ag retail that I worked with actually carried a mine gypsum, and it was always kind of a joke when we'd bring in that mine gypsum, because everyone would park their trucks at the farmer's place a half mile down the road, and then we'd have to close all the doors to the office, the chem shed, the fert plant, the shop. Basically, it was a 3 or 4 hour process of sealing off the yard before we hauled in that mine gypsum. Everyone was aware of this, because you start unloading that and there's just a black cloud, or a brown cloud as far as the eye can see. I mean, you run it through an auger once and it goes back to powder in a lot of cases, and the entire yard was covered with a brown dust, or a fine layer of dust. It just wasn't a very fun operation. I mean, how much we were actually losing compared to what we bought, I mean, that's always a question. But when you look at that dust or that powder, that doesn't fit in with the logistics of Western Canada. I mean, more and more floaters are coming back into Western Canada, but I would still say the gross majority of fertilizer applications in Canada are through a drill of some sort, or a seeding application. So when you think about that, if you had dust into that seeding application, I mean, we're talking early spring. We have logistical challenges where we try to get as much acre seeded as possible. Guys are seeding through the night, high humidity situations. A dust in a high humidity situation, it does not bode well for a piece of agronomic equipment in Western Canada. You get that dust buildup in distributors, in rollers, basically every corner of a piece of equipment, and then you add humidity into the mix, something we can't control, and it turns into a slime, which turns into a paste, which turns into a cake, which basically plugs off that drill. And I think anyone in that situation knows very well it's not fun unplugging that. It's downtime and it costs money. You compare that to Sulfur Plus, and I can't claim to know the trade secrets of exactly how they're making their product handle so good, but I suspect it's a combination of a number of things. Their process of extraction of sulfur, their ammonium lignosulfonate binder, their coating, their low sulfur. There's a number of things I'm sure that go into it, but at the end of the day, what matters to me is it does handle well. We can run it through drills. We can run it through blending plants. We can mix it with urea or other really hygroscopic fertilizers without issues. So I mean, when you can combine all those things together, easy is good in an agronomic area where time constraints are always a key topic of conversation. Just our logistics, our long winters, our short growing seasons, time constraints are always going to be a problem. So when you have a product that doesn't plug off the drill, that doesn't shut you down for a day or two, that you can get some work done in the dead of winter versus others that can't. I mean, all those carry value and really make the lives of growers in Western Canada quite a bit easier. And I think as such, you're going to see I mean, we've had entire retail switch their sulfur program, and once again, I'm deferring back to sulfur because that's what's commonly used, but it's almost short changing the calcium component of it a little bit. But I mean, what I'm saying is we've had entire ag retail switch their sulfur program over to Sulfur Plus, just because they were tired of the handling issues of a product like ammonium sulfate. So it does come into play. There is value to it, and growers recognize that as well. Oh, I think that's an easy question. I mean, we have some urea and sulfate production in Canada, but it's a very high percentage of fertilizer utilized or used in Canada is imported. That's just a global marketplace. As far as importing it from Kentucky, a product that's made in Kentucky, put on a train, shipped to Canada, I mean, that's relatively simple. I know the freight rates in the last 2 years have increased somewhat, but that's been for every product, not just fertilizer. But I mean, logistics of bringing fertilizer from Kentucky to Canada, I mean, that's almost a non-starter conversation. I mean, we bring phosphate from Morocco. We bring if you look at the global trade of fertilizer, shipping a calcium sulfate from Kentucky to Canada is barely a conversation starter. That's just part of the business. And what I would say about it is, I think they've done a very good job. Obviously, when dealing with Sulfur Plus, I mean, Josh Turner is a very common contact when it comes to logistics. And I mean, this is a guy that lives and breathes logistics. He's getting things where they need to be on the time frame that they need to be there. And I mean, he's done a very good job. Very easy to work with. I like these guys. I mean, they make my job more enjoyable as far as some of the hoops that I make Josh jump through, or not make Josh jump through, but some of the challenges I throw at Josh. I mean, he's pretty quick to rise to them. It's enjoyable working with guys like that. It's enjoyable that working with guys that understand the constraints or the demands that growers can put on us in a short time frame. And I mean, they do everything they can to meet those demands. So I mean, yeah, they've Sulfur Plus done a very good job. What's probably unique about Taurus, and we have a very good reputation in the industry in the sense that we might look at a company or a product or a technology for 12, 18, 24 months before we agree to take it on and take it to the marketplace. And I think a lot of companies struggle with that. They just want us to get out there and move product and make money and for them. And I guess you could say that we've got that reputation. Taurus has that reputation because we do the due diligence, we do the work, we do the vetting to a point where we stamp our name on something, we represent something in Western Canada. I mean, we truly believe it has a fit. We truly believe that this is a next step for agriculture in Western Canada. Excuse me, or Canada in general. So in the vetting process of Sulfur Plus, I think first and foremost, the agronomy's got to fit. We got to be providing something that we've currently don't have, or improve upon something we currently have in Western Canada. And as I talked about earlier, with the logistics, with the agronomy, with everything Sulfur Plus brings to the table, I mean, it's funny because I mean they come to us and tell us, well, okay, we have this product that handles like this, it has a controlled release curve like this, and a low salt index, and soil amendment properties, and this humic and fulvic binder that contributes so much. And I mean, we go through all the agronomy, and if anything, I was probably more skeptical than I normally am with a new product, because you kind of go through the checklist of what this product has, and I think I was skeptical in the sense that that sounds a little too good to be true in my mind. So 6 months in, 12 months in, I think we were getting into close to 18 months in. We were really going through the due diligence with this product, and I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. I kept waiting to find the hole in it and the challenge with it. And you know what? I was pleasantly surprised what they brought to us. Did what they said it would do. The product was what they said it was. And in all our vetting process, I think that's first and foremost, agronomically. Sulfur Plus has allowed Taurus to bring a product to the marketplace that really fills a lot of holes in our agronomic scheme. To start out with, I mean, there's maybe some challenges or growing process, but I mean, we worked through those, and we kind of got into a very nice groove. And you got guys like Peter and Josh supporting you all the way along, and yeah, I think any of the logistical challenges or geographical challenges, whatever those may be, I mean, I think Taurus and Sulfur Plus have combined to meet them head on, and they've been really good to work with. And I mean, I think both companies would agree that we've been extremely successful in that process over the last 4 years. I mean, we started with very few tons that first year, whether that was 2017 or 2018, whatever that is, before we actually even signed the official agreement. And I couldn't say what we've done since then, but I think it's been a minimum of doubling to tripling the business every year. And the agronomy speaks for itself on that. And I mean, the logistics and business component of it is something that we continue to work very hard to make easy for people every day. So yes, to answer the question, it's been a very good relationship. It's been a very good business relationship, and I think probably the most important piece of it is we've brought an awful lot of value to growers in Western Canada with the addition of this product in our portfolio, and I mean, I think that's something that Sulfur Plus should be very proud of.